Losing a superstar to NBA free agency is the most devastating hit to team building that a team can take. The Cavs averaged just 24 wins per season for 4 years after LeBron left them in 2010. The Thunder went from the most exciting young team of the decade to first-round playoff exit mediocrity after Kevin Durant left them in 2016. And everything that has happened in Oklahoma City since, good and bad, can be traced directly back to Durant leaving them in the first place. After winning a title in 2019, the Raptors have been largely irrelevant in terms of contention since losing Kawhi Leonard in the following offseason, despite being arguably the best front office and organization in the sport in the few years prior to and the years since Kawhi left. That last example proves that no amount of smart trades and good development and good drafting can make up for losing an all-NBA caliber player for nothing in free agency, and that is a reality that the Milwaukee Bucks nearly lived through with Giannis Antetokounmpo a few years ago. And because things have worked out so well for the Bucks since, it's really easy to forget just how close they were to losing Giannis. Really quickly though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticketing app that makes buying tickets to live events super simple. I've used SeatGeek myself this past year to go to an Orlando versus Dallas game, had a great experience, and by far the best thing about SeatGeek is they just make everything easy on you. When you want to go to a basketball game, football, a concert, whatever the case may be, you just want to go and you want to have fun. You don't want to have to do all this research into where you're sitting, where the good deals are, how much you're going to spend. So all you have to do on SeatGeek is you just scroll through and it's going to tell you exactly what kind of deal you're getting at each seat. Green is good, yellow is worse, red is bad, and they make it super simple for you. That's all you want out of a ticketing app is simplicity. And of course, with the holiday and then going into the new year, there are a ton of events coming up, whether it be concerts, whether it be regular season basketball, playoff basketball, you've got regular season football, you've still got playoff football as well coming up. And if you want a deal, I have one for you. You can click the link down in the description. You can use code SPORTING for $20 off your first order at SeatGeek. Again, that link is in the description. You can use code SPORTING as well for $20 off your first order at SeatGeek. So if you're looking at going to an event sometime soon and you want a simple process in order to do that, SeatGeek is the place to be. And again, you can get $20 off with that link down in the description. And thank you again to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. A player who has single-handedly revitalized a Bucks franchise that was the worst team in the league during his rookie season after being selected 15th in his 2013 NBA draft. A 6-time All-Star, 1-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time MVP, an NBA Finals champion, and an NBA Finals MVP, Giannis has overachieved as much as any player in the league since being drafted, which is especially impactful when you consider that as a smaller market team, the Bucks would have had almost no path to the championship heights they've reached without the growth, in both a literal height and figurative basketball sense, that Giannis has shown throughout his career. With initial franchise savior and former second overall pick Jabari Parker never seeming to stay healthy, and uninspiring roster building through the first half of the 2010s, the Bucks would, as dramatically as any other team in the league, be absolutely nowhere without their superstar, which makes the story of how they almost lost him entirely that much more fascinating. The theme of this era of NBA basketball is by far player movement, and a team like the Bucks retaining an MVP caliber player like Giannis throughout his entire career is pretty rare over the past decade. Right now, Giannis is in his 10th year in the league, a point in which their respective careers, LeBron had already changed teams once and was 2 years away from doing it again. At this point in his career, KD had also already signed with the Warriors, and a James Harden contract dispute led to him getting traded to the Rockets, and he was a year and a half away from requesting a trade to Brooklyn as well. There truly are countless examples of all NBA players switching teams within their first 10 years in the league, and only a few that actively avoided true free agency to stay with the team that drafted them. Which brings us to the heart of today's video. There was a time in which it became a very real possibility that Giannis was going to take that LeBron and KD path and jump to a super team. And that time was a very interesting year for the league, 2020. In the few years prior to 2020, the Bucks had made marginal improvements under Jason Kidd and then jumped to a great regular season team after hiring Mike Budenholzer as head coach. But after blowing a 2-0 lead in the conference finals in 2019 to the eventual champion Raptors, and then following that up by losing to the 5th seeded Heat in the second round of the bubble in just 5 games, the writing seemed to be on the wall for Giannis to potentially leave the Bucks. They were a great regular season team with a great regular season head coach, but had a largely incomplete playoff roster with only Chris Middleton as the other all-star around Giannis. And without Giannis, it was pretty clear that they would have been at best like a fringe playoff team. So playoff disappointment, lack of help on the roster, and one MVP caliber player holding up basically the entire team. That was a perfect recipe that matched exactly with the last 10 All-NBA caliber players that had ended up leaving their previous teams. And to top it off, there were predictably a ton of teams circling the free agency waters waiting for exactly this scenario to happen. The Giannis extension in 2020 was something that I was covering on this channel over a year in advance, and the league was preparing for well before that. Teams were ready to strike, some of which had been building their rosters and salary cap sheets for years just to create a chance at getting Giannis in 2021. Now, more specifically, the biggest threats at the time in 2020 to sign Giannis away as a 2021 free agent were some teams that we'd become pretty familiar with in the free agency process: the Mavs and the Heat. The Heat, who had just eliminated Giannis and the Bucks in the playoffs, had all of the super team building and quality organization reputation that the Bucks lacked, in addition to the playoff proven roster that could deliver on the championship promise that the Bucks hadn't been able to that point. A core of Jimmy Butler, Giannis, and Bam Adebayo would have been the most feared defensive lineup in the league by far, and it would have made total sense for Giannis to go to Miami given their history of attracting stars. The Mavs, on the other hand, were a much more outside of the box option. They had the 21-year-old Luka Doncic fresh off leading the best offense in the league, which represented the possibility of a devastating two-man combination alongside Giannis that would have been impossible to stop. Side note, this was the outcome that I was hoping for at the time because it would have been incredible to see these two guys play alongside each other, and I still kind of wish we would have gotten to see what that would have looked like. Now, having said that, those were the options at the time that Giannis was considering signing an extension with the Bucks in 2020. Let me really frame this for you. You had the playoff-proven, veteran, defensive-minded Miami Heat, arguably the best organization in the league at the time, with the benefits of living Miami, a bigger market, a great coach, and young players to continue to grow alongside. You also had the up-and-coming Mavs, an offensive juggernaut before Giannis even gets there, an international pairing with the best under-23 player in the league, all the benefits of living in Dallas, a championship-winning head coach, and an owner that you know will spend to win. You also have the usual suspects that could have found a way to be attractive destinations as well, like the Knicks and the Lakers. And lastly, you had the kind of boring Milwaukee Bucks, a small market team without modern playoff success, a unproven playoff coach, and a core around Giannis that at best was average. And so after being eliminated from the playoffs in 2020 with all these options in front of him, Giannis and the front office had a meeting in which they promised to improve the roster in a significant way, even without a full commitment from Giannis on signing an extension going into his last season under contract. And this is the first of two huge points you have to understand in this story. The Bucks followed through on that promise that they made in that meeting to Giannis, despite great risk to the future of the franchise. They sent a ton of future picks and assets to the Pelicans in exchange for Jrue Holiday in the hopes that that would be the move that pushed them towards true championship contention. They also nearly made a move for Bogdanović, though that fell apart at the last minute. But the Holiday move in particular was fascinating at the time. This was a really delicate situation, and had the Bucks mishandled it, it easily could have led to Giannis leaving as a free agent. And we detailed in the intro how devastating that can be to a franchise. They could have simply refused to move any future draft capital of any kind, much less as many picks and as far into the future as they did in the Holiday trade, without an extension in place with Giannis. You could even argue that the Holiday trade was completely foolish at the time because the Bucks had no guarantee that Giannis was going to be on the roster for more than just one more season, and they were trading away picks in 2025. And just think for a second about what that team would have looked like if Giannis didn't sign the extension. The Holiday trade was made just weeks before the deadline by which Giannis had to make his decision, so he couldn't even see this team on the floor in actual NBA games before making that choice. And had he chosen to wait until true free agency in 2021, that season could have been a complete circus. The pressure not only of Giannis possibly leaving for nothing, but the trade rumors that would come along with that, not to mention a possible Billy King Nets-like disaster scenario from the Holiday trade if Giannis did decide to leave. And for a lot of those reasons, I was pretty critical of the Holiday trade at the time, simply because that was a ton to give up for a player that had injury issues at the time and that we didn't really see as a perennial all-NBA caliber player. And then you consider the fact that they didn't even have a commitment from Giannis when they made the deal. And if Giannis decided to leave, they were trading away years of lottery selections for a team that without Giannis certainly would not have been anything remotely close to a championship contender. And for a few weeks after the Holiday trade, there was silence on what Giannis's decision would ultimately be. Sure, the trade made the Bucks more interesting and more importantly proved that they were very serious about improving the roster, but they weren't seen as the proven championship organization we now know, and those other options were certainly still very intriguing to Giannis. Now, as we all know, in the end, the Bucks' gamble paid off. Giannis signs the Supermax extension in December of 2020, Jrue Holiday plays fantastic for them, and less than a year later, they're celebrating an NBA title. Both Giannis and Budenholzer shook off some playoff demons in that 2021 run, with Giannis putting up one of the greatest championship winning performances in league history. And continued growth of players on the roster, in addition to smart team building, put this team on track to be a true championship contender around Giannis for years and years to come. And certainly it seems like right now, this guy's a buck for life. But this is the second huge point in this story that you need to understand, and it's the single biggest reason why I was wrong about a good amount of my coverage on this the first time. Giannis is not like these other guys. He's not like LeBron. He's not like KD. He's not like James Harden. He wasn't a top high school player. He wasn't a player that was drafted in the top 5 of the draft. He wasn't seen as this big franchise-changing player at the time that he was selected 15th in 2013, and he had an appreciation for the Bucks going out on a limb and selecting a player as unknown as he was as a prospect, as high as they did in that draft. And he wanted to pay back that loyalty and that belief that they had in Giannis in a way that most other stars in the NBA don't, by giving his team the benefit of the doubt. As long as the goal was to win the title, which largely was the point of that meeting after the 2020 playoffs, Giannis was going to let the front office decide how best to make that happen. And if after that he felt like he should leave, then he'd consider it. And don't get me wrong, I fully believe that Giannis considered not signing the Supermax extension in 2020 and really exploring his options in 2021 free agency. Largely because he's clearly a very competitive person and there were some really great options out there for him. But ultimately, his loyalty to the Bucks has separated him from many of the other stars around the league, and he was rewarded with a championship that will always be more celebrated than many of the ring-chasing super teams of the past. And that concept of earned loyalty is really the moral of the story here. The Bucks earned Giannis's loyalty by believing in him as a prospect and empowering him as the future of the franchise as he continued to develop, and Giannis earned the loyalty of the organization through a ton of hard work to become the most improved player in the league from the time he was drafted on. That combination made Milwaukee feel comfortable making the Holiday trade even without a commitment from Giannis, and without that deal and without that offseason, they certainly would still be without a title. Now, that isn't to say that that loyalty will last forever, though. Giannis is going to continue to be tempted by other organizations for the rest of his career, and if the Bucks struggle to transition to a new core after Middleton and Holiday age this team out of contention, I might just have to make another one of these videos in 10 years. But until then, Giannis re-signing with the Bucks has been the ultimate loyalty fairy tale in an era that has increasingly felt like mercenary for hire championships were the norm, which makes it increasingly easy to forget just how close all this was to never happening in the first place.